And a very good morning to you. Now that you know how the roads are looking, it's best to be informed as to the big stories you're waking up to as you get to wherever you're going, whether it's work or school. And that's why we do the newspaper review every single morning. My panel is in place, but before we get to them, let's look at the headlines of each of the dailies and then get to the matters therein. Front page of the People Daily. How Kiraito ended Raila's prison hunger strike. Meru governor recalls how ODM leader had refused to eat for a week but accepted food after he cautioned him not to play into Moi's hands while in detention. A story of Kenya's history right there, making the front pages of the People Daily this morning. Moving on to the Standard, Raila on the front page there, but talking about something else. We are ready for powerful premier. Executive structure. Opposition leader says parliamentary system is the best way to stop election-related violence and ethnic division. Of course, this playing into what the referendum will really be all about. And that's what they were talking about right there. And it makes us front page of your Standard this morning. Front page of the Star. Crisis at City Hall as Sonko's reign of chaos goes on. MCA's warn of paralysis, faulty county chief's management style right there. Governor suspends 16 senior officials following school deaths. And the picture right there of the governor and, of course, the executives of whom he suspended. Mohamed Dagani of Health and Charles Kerich, Finance and Economic Planning. That's the lead story in your copy of the Star. Daily Nation front page, it's all matters regional. Uhuru reaches out to Somalia over border. President Farmajo insists dispute must be resolved by international court. Neighbors agree to stop all hostilities and resume normal relations on that particular issue. So right now it's still a lot of diplomacy going on at work to forestall that getting to the courts right there. Then finally, front page of the Business Daily, Telkom Airtel merger in peril hours to D-Day. Telcos have until tomorrow to seal deal, but EACC has put transactions on ice as far as this is concerned, and it's a story that you can get in your Business Daily therein. Lots to discuss this morning, and we are raring to do exactly that. As always, we love your feedback and your views on the news. You can get us at K24 TV across all social media platforms. You can also SMS us on 21222. In a bit, we'll also be opening the phone lines for you to chime in on our conversations as well. We'll let you know, and you can do that right here. But let's get right into it. Of course, once again, Gabriel Muthuma, political and governance expert. Karibu sana.
Asante sana, Jeff.
And the lady of the moment, Ruth Mbogo. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to the new studio.
Thank you.
She walked in, she's like, it's been a while since I've been here.
2 years.
2 years?
Yes.
Wow. Well, welcome home. Welcome back. Okay, let's look at the People Daily. A couple of stories that you need to address therein. I want us to move to page 2 of the PD. Tragedy has traumatized me, says academy owner. The owner of the ill-fated school in Dagoretti, where 7 pupils died after the building collapsed, is saying he's shocked and traumatized. This, according to Moses Wainaina. There's a quote here. I'm always the first person to arrive here in the morning and mostly the last to leave. And for over 10 years, which I have been supervising the operations of this school, I have never thought that such a tragic incident would ever happen. Let's interrogate this for a moment, Gabriel, as you look at this.
Right.
We looked at the structure and how it had been made.
Correct.
Any architect who came to the scene, any person, any contractor talked about the fact that there was a glaring structural integrity issue. Mm-hmm. Are we absconding Moses Wainaina and saying that, okay, fine, let's get the contractor who did this and follow it up from there? Because from this story, it almost seems like he's a victim as well as to what happened and didn't know what was going on.
No, first of all, I don't think I'd believe that. I'll be the fact that, we send our condolences to the kids who lost their lives and those that were injured. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't actually take the blame away from the people who are supposed to, to be the key stakeholders to such an environment. First of all, you look at the building owner. Secondly, even though he's talking about 10 years, there is, like you've just called it, the integrity of the building. He's the one who's there every day. I think there are telltale signs which would have, allowed him to even call professionals. The other thing is, apart from the money-making aspect, there's also the safety aspect. Yeah. So if you look at it, there are so many things, and actually it's not only him. There are various offices that stand culpable. One among them is, and as much as we would like to run away from, is the city council or the county government. Mm-hmm. Jeff, I don't know whether you've tried to paint your wall or do any light fixtures at home. Mm-hmm. Before you say cut and a half, there's a pickup full of county guys, and you do not know where they come from. Mm-hmm. Right?
Right.
A few months back, the same county was all over Nairobi demolishing buildings. Why? They told us some were erected illegally, some were in riparian land, and we agree. How do you miss such a structure if you are on the ground?
Right.
And you know that's your job, that's what would be expected. So I think there are several areas and several departments or several offices that failed. When you come to the Ministry of Education, they also stand charged in a way, because this is, from what we've been told, was an exam center. So there are so many things. I mean, it raises concern.
They are aware of the existence of this school.
It raises concern. Why all of a sudden? And by the way, we should not just look at it as just because it's a private school. I mean, even public schools, I had somebody say, you know what, publics, you should do this. We've had dormitories burning in public schools. It's not that they are in a better place anyway. All right? So I believe there's so much that needs to be done.
Right.
Whether it's the integrity tests of most buildings, and I like the CS Education has actually, moved into that direction. These are things that we should be doing almost annually.
Right, and we'll be talking about that.
Do you remember the Moi Girls incident? What happened to that report? That's something many people have never asked. Are told, we will find out how, just in case there's a fire, what are the drills? What are the firefighting mechanisms? If you go to many schools today, they don't have that.
Right.
They've not. But go to any building or many private schools, you will find that they have a particular way where even students are taught, should a fire break out, or should there be an emergency, this is a place where you meet. I mean, they've been taught all these things. So, Jeff, I think as we go back into writing policies, we need to be educated that some of these buildings we must have whether it's a committee or whatever we must come up with. We must find a way where we have somebody or that department assigned to visit these places, mainly where children are involved.
Ruth, I'll bring you in on this as well, because we're looking at a situation where we're saying he didn't build this structure by himself. He contracted somebody who came in, who we're assuming is a licensed professional, who has also gotten his licensing from a particular organization. Should we be going up that particular trail to see how far this goes in terms of bring your contractor, bring the documents that they were given, if this building was approved, who approved it, so you actually get the people culpable. As we talk about Moses and whether he knew about construction not for the 10 years, we go through the contractor who put this up and the people who authorized this building to be put there.
Well, for me, I think it is a basic question of what was his motivation when he was coming up with this school. Because I read that he says for him it was all about giving back to the community, and he never had any intentions of he wasn't part of a cartel, which is something I would want to dispute, because a bad structure is a bad structure. You do not need to go back to who was the contractor to understand and know that this is a bad structure. We are talking about a story house that is a Mabati story house building. We do not need mathematics or even digging in to understand that this is clearly a bad structure. And for me, it boils down to the question of the kind of cartels that have now infiltrated the education system, which is very unfortunate, because we entrust the lives of our children with our schools. We entrust the lives of our children with the institutions that we take them to. Today morning, as I was leaving the house very early in the morning, at 4 a.m. as I was preparing, I could hear school buses coming into the estate. And so basically we are seeing schools completely disregarding laws that have been put in place. Because for me, I think this is clear disregard of laws. What this Wainaina guy is trying to tell us is he's trying to put himself in a position where, say for instance, I'm running a children's home and I'm telling myself that, I want to give back to the community. But then when you come to this children's home, first and foremost, the sanitation is out of this world, that you cannot even imagine that children, let's say below the age of 1 year old, 6-month-old babies are surviving under such conditions. Poor sanitation, no food, no water. And then when something happens and an investigation is done and it is found that a lot of children have died because of poor sanitation, then I will come out and say that, I was only giving back to the community. even if you're giving back to the community and trying to come up with a solution for people, because apparently that area did not have a public school, even when you're coming up with a solution for the community, can you kindly look at the status of the facilities that you're offering? And then again, back to the question of cartels. You know, this is not the only school that is dilapidated and in that particular disgusting state. I have personally visited 1 or 2 schools in Kibra, giving talks here and there, and you find the exact same structure. In fact, when this school came down, I was reminded of 2 years ago, I once gave a talk at a school in Kibra. But you see, in as much as these people are poor and cannot afford better education services, cannot afford to take their children to very expensive schools, the government still needs to regulate the kind of structures that are put up, you know, the kind of places these kids go to. Some of those schools are in very funny places where kids have to cross over, you know, bridges that can easily collapse anytime. What is the government doing about it? What is the Ministry of Education doing about it? Forget about structures. The other day we saw parents complaining on social media that the kind of books that schools are recommending for their children are books that are filled with vulgarities, books that even you as an adult would be ashamed and embarrassed to read. What is happening? Again, the issue of cartels, you know, people paying kickbacks to the the Curriculum Institute, the Institute of Curriculum Development, and getting their books, you know, put up for as set books in schools. So we really need to embrace integrity as a nation, because it is costing us. Look at these kids. I was particularly saddened by the story of the, you know, the top student who had the parents literally looked up to her to get over 430 marks and go to a national school. You know, lives and futures destroyed, because for these families, education is the only solution they have, and they understand that it is the only weapon to fight poverty. Now, when cartels and corruption infiltrates the education system, where do we stand as a nation? I want to say this man knew that the state of his school was pathetic, and there are people who have probably complained, maybe parents who had probably complained, and he probably never listened or took their complaints seriously. That kind of school, first of all, you saw the small compound within which it was located, and it was hosting over 600 students.
Let's ask ourselves right on this one. Are we saying that, because when you look at all of these factors, first of all, how the school was set up in terms of the physical structure itself, but also the fact that we are forgetting that when this accident happened, it was, I think, around 7? It wasn't even 8.
Yes,
When you look at the Basic Education Act, it's supposed to be from 8 when children are in school.
They're supposed to be in school at 8.
So it's a really
but you know, Jeff, if we are going to look at the timing, and I don't want to think that, because if we are going to look at the timing in itself, then it would mean that disaster is time sensitive. Right? So it could have happened anytime.
No, not about even in terms of the timing, but in the sense that they shouldn't even have been there in the first place. So in terms of just going against the act, in terms of timing and all of that.
Those are some of the rules and, let me say, regulations that are never followed. We can sit here and say, you know, probably disaster would not have come if these kids were not in class at that particular moment. But then again, there are so many accidents that have happened even when in boarding schools. There are so many accidents that have happened when these children, when these children are in a school bus going to a national festival. We've read these things. You remember was it in Machakos?
Right.
When
the accident.
Yes, and the driver was driving past what? Past the allowed, you know, a time.
Is it an enforcement issue we have with the ministry?
I think it is. I think it is. And like Ruth is saying here, even when you look at the issue about the books, you know, you're starting to wonder who is mandated to be looking at this. I know there was a committee that was set by the previous CS. This committee there was this gentleman called Mike Eldon, and in that committee, all they were doing was they were supposed to vet books, the books that go to schools. So they had this committee. All they did was look at the books, whether they are good for consumption of the public. And all of a sudden, that committee is no more. So you can't ask yourself, even if we have these committees, when they come out and give us guidelines, are those guidelines followed? Because really, before a book comes to the shelf, it should pass several stages of vetting. But like Ruth has actually alluded to it, it is actually true. You have so many cartels within the publishing sector.
Right.
And it is actually crazy when they go to bed with ministry officials. Because now you don't even know what your child will be reading. All of a sudden they'll come home with a set book or with a book that actually is, you're told has been passed. And when you open it, you start reading very funny things. So I think there's one thing that you've just said. Is it the fact that people are not following these regulations? I think there's a big aspect of where people are not following these regulations. But there's also one thing about this school that I would want us to put in mind. And I think the owner of the school may have gotten one thing right. Because if you're told the people who are going into that school were actually doing very well in national examinations, he had about 7 people who got 400 marks and above, and everybody else had about 350. So at least there's something that, you know, was happening. But then, if we were sensitive to the environment where our children are, then I think we would have arrested this situation earlier. Having said that, there's also something that should commensurate truth. You see, as the population grows, the institution, our academic institution, should also grow because it tells you there are more children. And if they will not grow, the fact that we read all the time that school land has been, grabbed, the fact that we hear institutions have not built libraries, the fact that we hear the last time a school in Nairobi was built was actually built in Kibra by Ken Okoth, you start wondering, the last school was built in the 80s. So how has the population been doing? And the population has been increasing. One thing comes to mind, and that is the schools are overcrowded. Right? So there has to be, it must commensurate that as the population grows, our academic institutions should also grow, not actually dwindle as it is. Go to most schools. Go to most schools in Nairobi. Playgrounds. You'll never find them. Very taken. And then we still talk about getting young kids into sports. That is where they should begin. So
it's a bigger issue.
No. Let me tell you, it is a major issue than what we are reading. Most schools, forget the private, most schools, even the public schools, they are overcrowded.
We take a peek at that particular point in time. We want your say on this as well, because it's a story that's still developing. We're waiting to see what the DCI will bring out from its investigations as well. And also, who's going to be prosecuted for this? That's what we need to answer here as we talk about that as well. Tweet us at K24TV. The SMS line is 21222. And we're back after the break. MPs want Gilo arrested for toxic anti-Muslim remarks. We talk about that. And also, of course, Sonko has decided to also weigh in as far as this is concerned. And he said he's going to take responsibility for what the county probably hadn't done with regard to this particular school. We talk about that and plenty more. This is your newspaper review. Good morning.